Hey everybody, it's Necromedes again, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. It's still going to fall under the same category as what we've been doing, but instead of working with pixels and pixel art and that sort of thing, we are instead going to be working with RPG Maker VX Ace itself. I don't want this this channel to be strictly about, spriting and effects and stuff like that. So we're also going to cover the basics of actual game development. Now, like I said before, the only two engines that I really mess around with are RPG Maker and Game Maker. But I actually devote more of my time to RPG Maker, so that's what we're going to be covering in this tutorial. Now, what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be going over just the basic idea and principles and whatnot. I'm not sure if principles is the correct definition, but the basic idea of how events work. Now, for those of you who don't know anything about RPG Maker, what an event is it's an object in the game that affects the game flow in one form or another. You can think of it as kind of a sense of scripting and coding. It actually has a lot in common with scripting, but it's nowhere near as detailed. You're not going to have to worry about anything like syntax and definition ends and all that sort of stuff. Events are fairly easy to put together. To make one, you just double click. Well, first of all, you go to the event tab up here, you can press F6. I'm not going to be pressing any of the F number buttons, because if you remember in my last video, I accidentally shut off my recording software by pushing F10 to open the resource manager, so that caused a little bit of a speed bump in the video. But you can go to Event Editor here, you open it up, and up here you've got New Event. You can name it whatever you want. We're going to call this Tutorial. And when you save it, the name should change there in the corner. Edit event, whatever. But we're just going to go down the list, and we're not going to really be focusing too much on how to do things, as more of what the basic concept of what the event option does. Of course, if it's something relatively simple, I'll go ahead and go over it. But some of the more advanced stuff, like switches, self-switches, variables, that sort of stuff, will probably be in a separate video all on its own. With the graphic, you can literally pick from any of the default graphics for characters in the graphics folder, and sometimes you can even select from tile sets. Up here, any graphic with a blue dot next to it is one of the default graphics, and any of them with a red dot is a custom one that you've imported. Like, for instance, here's our glowing ball that we did in the second video, and that's a random half naked guy. We're not going to worry about him, but just for the time being, we're going to go ahead and use our glowing ball graphic. Now I'll explain what the things do with the first page of the event editor here. Switches. What you can think of a switch as literally an on and off switch. That's literally what it does in the game. When you use switches in something, it's basically just asking a question: is this switch on or is this switch off? And then you can go from there. I'll cover that a little bit more in detail here pretty soon. And the same thing applies with variables. That's a little bit more complicated than switches, and once again, that's going to be one of the things that we'll be covering at a later date. Self-switch, it's similar to switches, but not quite exactly the same thing. Item, it checks as to whether or not a certain item exists, or in this case, if the player has a specified item in their inventory. You can pick from anything that's in the items selection. And the same thing with actor. If an actor or character is in the player's party, then what all these are conditions. And if any of these things are met, like for instance if the actor is in the party, it will set off whatever is in the event. Same thing with the switches, variable, self-switch, item, all that different stuff. Autonomous movement is how the event moves. Like the move type, you've got a few options here. Fixed means that it doesn't move at all. It just stands there. Random, it will move at random. Completely random. It doesn't have a set pattern of movement. Approach means it will constantly approach the player. And custom allows you to actually edit a custom move path for it. Why does it keep popping up with this? Just keep the current scheme, I don't care. But yeah, it allows you to create your own custom path, and that you can actually do some pretty interesting stuff with that. Speed, I believe the default speed is ×2 slower. I may be wrong with that. That's one of the things that I've never really stuck in my memory. But ×8 slower is really slow. It's more of a case of how frequently it moves, not necessarily how fast it moves. And you think about it that way, the higher the frequency, the more it's going to appear to be moving faster. So it's basically how frequently it takes a step. Oh, I'm sorry, I got that backwards. Here's the actual frequency, and this is how fast the event moves. Priority is basically its priority. It's kind of like layers in Paint.net actually, and it's at what priority it takes on the map. You've got below characters, so the character, if it were to move on top of it, it would literally look like the character was on top of the event. The character's graphic would take precedence over the event's graphic. Same as characters, it's going to be on the same level, which means that the character won't be able to move over or underneath it, and it'll basically it'll be a tangible object that will stop the player from moving. And then above characters, it's the same thing as below characters, it's above obviously. Trigger is basically what sets it off, how it's activated. Action button means that the character actually has to walk up and, for instance, if it's a villager or something like that, or a switch on the wall, the character actually has to walk up to it and activate it for it to carry out whatever the contents are. Player touch means that the event will go off the moment that the player touches it. And this is really handy for starting an event, say as the intro of an area. If you want the player to see something happen or some dialogue to play as soon as they enter the area, and they make their way up the hallway, and right there at the end you want to be set off, you would have an invisible event, which means it wouldn't have a graphic at the end of the hallway, and as soon as the player steps onto it, it would set it off. Event touch means that when another event touches this event, it will be set off. It's similar to the player touch, only it's for events. Auto run means that it will run immediately when the player enters the area. Parallel process is similar, but the difference between it and auto run is when auto run is activated, for the most part, the event is going to be running and it's going to be a step-by-step progress of what other things happen. So obviously this thing would happen first, then this, then this. Parallel process, however, allows the event to work alongside other events. So all this other stuff can be going on with other events, and this will still happen at the same time when the player enters the area. And it will constantly take place until the event is either deleted or an empty page is activated, which we'll go over in a moment. Options. Walking animation means that when the event moves, it will look like it's walking. Now, for instance, with the glow sprite, it would be when it's moving around, each step that it would take, the graphic would change. Stepping animation means that the animation of the sprite is constant. Doesn't matter if it's moving or stopped, it's constantly using the animation. Direction fix means that whatever direction you would choose, let's find another actor that we can go ahead and describe this with. If its starting graphic would be this character looking to the right, then that means if direction fix is on, that is the only direction it will face, period. Doesn't matter if the player is talking to it or if it's moving around, it is constantly facing that direction. And through makes it to where the player can pass through the event. Basically like a ghost. I mean, it's still there, and it still has the same priority, same as character, below character, above character, but it just means that even though it has that priority, the player and even other events can pass through it, which is really handy when you're setting up like boundaries for we'll say like guards and stuff like that are walking around. So let's say you got the events set up there that will activate on player touch. You want like an effect to go off, a special effect or something like that. It means that the player can still pass through this, but the other events as well can get passed through it as well, is what I'm trying to say. Because you see, normally if you set it as below or above character, the character can pass over it or underneath it, but other events can't necessarily. Now we'll go on to the actual contents of events, and you've got a lot of options here. Now, we're just gonna breeze over the concept of most of these. Actually, a lot of these sections can be basically just breezed over completely with just a little bit of description. Messages, showing text, is a dialog box will pop up, and you can type whatever it is in here. Background, you can change to dim background and transparent. That really just affects what the dialog box looks like. Like for instance here, it's a solid box, and dim would be apparently black. I don't know why it's shown up like that. Transparent means that you can actually see through it. Oh, right. Dim background means that it's essentially a black strip going through the center or top or bottom of the screen, and it kind of gives it more of a theatrical effect. And obviously you can select if it's at the top, middle, or bottom of the screen. Show choices. This is your yes and no choices. And when you set one of these up, you'll be given branches. Now we'll just go ahead and select this real fast. So you see, you'd have this in the list of things that'll happen. And just so you know, it does go from top to bottom as the order of things happening in the event list. So we'll say you activate this ball and it gives you the choice of yes or no. You can set it up to where you have an entire list of things that'll happen if the player selects yes, and then you can either leave no as empty or however you want to do it, and have a completely different option or order of events in this case for the other answer. Now, you're initially allowed only 4 choices. There are a few custom scripts out there that I've come across that will allow you to add on to these for a whole list of different choices to select from, but we're not going over scripts at all. So there's the concept of that. Input number, it's basically like, we'll say the player comes across a safe and it requires a certain combination for it. You can use this this option for actually being able to put in different number combinations in the game. And what it does is it stores it to a variable. Now we'll be covering variables in just a moment. Key item. I have personally never used key items, so I honestly don't have very much I can say about it. Selects a key item possessed by the party and stores it to an ID. Oh, okay. So it basically takes an item and stores it to a variable. I think that's how it works. In any case, show scrolling text. It gives you the like pre-game or end-game credits type effect where it's scrolling text from the bottom of the screen. Game progression. I can't talk. Game progression. Control switches. Here you can name your switch. You can have a maximum of up to, I think it was 5,000 switches, which gives you a lot of options to work with in game. Seems to how there are 20 switches per section, and it goes all the way up to 5,000. For instance, yeah, those are a lot of switches that you can use, so you don't really have to worry about running out of room anytime soon. Batch. Batch operates all switches found between 2 specified numbers, so basically that means that we'll say you want switches 1 through 6 to activate all at once. So for the batch, you just pick 1 and 6, and 1 through 6 switches will all either turn on or off. Variables. This will definitely have to be a video all its own. Variables have essentially the same layout as switches. You can have 5,000 different variables, you can name them, etc. The difference is, what variables are basically empty slots that you can save numbers to. And that that helps out when it comes to things like I mentioned before, safe combinations, um, having a certain number of events to appear on the screen, that sort of thing. Um, and you can set them to a specific number, you can add to a pre-existing number, you can subtract from it, multiply, divide, modify, divides the pre-operation variable by the operand and stores the remainder. So you can literally do just about anything math-wise when it comes to variables. Operand is you take the operation of what you're wanting to do, and the operand constant is you can make a constant number, like it's always 2. You can actually have the operand be based off of a different variable if you wanted to. You can have random variables generated. You can, for instance, random number between 1 and 6. And that's actually really good for making random dialogue from characters you encounter, or random items, and all sorts of things, because what you can do is you can use the random number to be stored to a variable, and then you can check that variable, and depending on what number it is the effect that happens. I know that kind of sounds confusing, but it's actually pretty simple once you get into it and play around with it and practice. Game data. This allows you to pick from a multitude of different things. You can take the number of the item in your inventory, weapon, armor, actor, and what this basically does is, for instance, with character, you can select the location on the screen and save it to a variable, like the map X and max Y axis locations, enemy HP, and all the other different attributes, actor level, experience, HP, once again all the way up through the other attributes, map ID, number of party members, the gold that the player has, the number of steps the players have made, the current play time, the number on a timer, number of times that they have saved, number of times that they have entered a battle. And then you've got the script, which you can, if you knew scripting, you could use a string of script to affect variables somehow. I'm not a scripter though, per se, so I can't really give you any information on that. Self-switch, it's essentially the same thing as a normal switch, except that it only pertains to the event that it's in, hence why it's called a self-switch. And you've got self-switch A, B, C, and D. And you can actually do some pretty interesting things with self-switches. I'll probably put that into the video pertaining to switches and variables, and show you some of the things that you can do with it. Right now we're really just going over the basics though. Control timer. You can start a timer that will pop up in the corner of your screen, and you can set the number of minutes, seconds, you can stop it, etc. Conditional branches. This is a little confusing. This is kind of like the choice event that I showed you earlier with the yes and no choices. This, however, essentially is the same thing, but it's not a yes or no question that determines it. It's something in the game itself. Like if a specific switch is on, if a variable is equal to, greater than, less than, equal to, etc., to a specific number that you can determine. Whether a self switch is on or off, if the timer that you've activated is at a certain amount of time. Different things with whether or not a specific actor is a class, has a skill, has a weapon equipped, has a status effect, or is simply in the party. Enemy, whether or not this is for an in-battle event, which we can cover later on in more depth, but it basically just shows whether or not a specific enemy has appeared in the battle, if it has a status effect, if the player is facing down, up, left, right, if the vehicle is being driven. So you can literally do a conditional branch for just about anything in the engine, and if something isn't in there and you know scripting, then you can go ahead and add a little string of script here to make it happen. Loop basically just makes a certain number of different event options to loop over and over and over again. Break loop stops the loop from actually taking place. Exit event processing, it ends any events that are currently running, which is interesting if, for instance, we'll say a giant robot is chasing a little girl, and you have to reach the power switch on the wall to stop the robot from chasing the girl. So they're running back and forth, and you can't keep up with them. So you can use exit event processing to stop all events on the screen. And then you can actually go up to the girl and talk to her and whatever. Common events are essentially events that you have saved. Like if it's a type of event that you're going to be using over and over again and you don't want to have to keep remaking it every single time, you can literally just go call common event and whatever number. Label, it's essentially, I believe, I've never used labels before, but I believe you put a label into an event, and then you can use the jump to label to automatically jump the event priority and the order of events to wherever the label is, and it will continue from there. Comments are literally just comments that you can put in here. They do absolutely nothing for the game unless it's pertaining to a script or something and it's set up that way. And it's basically just notes for you to hang on to if you want to remember a certain something about the event or whatever. Party options, these are self-explanatory. You can change the amount of gold you have. You can change the number of a certain item you have, or you can add it to your party, or to your inventory. Increase, decrease, etc. Change weapons, armor, change party member. Same thing with the actor portion here. You can change their HP, MP, what state their status effect they've got, completely recover the HP and MP, and recovers from all states. That's basically like the statues of Athena in Lunar, if you've ever played that. It's essentially what it does. So yeah, you can literally change everything, even a player's name. If you want it to be changed to a pre-specified name, you can do that. In the next page, we've got movement. Transfer player is what you're going to be using for using doors and teleporters and that sort of thing. Which means when this portion of the event is activated, you can either move the player from one part of the map to the other, or to a completely different map altogether. And you can even use variables to determine where exactly they're going to be put on the map and what map they go to. Set vehicle location, which basically it just in the game you've got options for using vehicles like boats, airships, that sort of thing, and this basically just changes the location of where it is. Set event location. It literally is just moving a designated event. You can choose from different events up here, and then you can change the location of where they are with the X and Y coordinates. Or you can swap it out with a completely different event on the map, and they just swap places. Scroll map allows you to actually scroll and move the view on the map to a different location, direction up, down, left, right. Distance is in how many squares it moves, the speed that it happens. Set move route is very interesting. This is actually identical to the custom move type in autonomous movement that we covered earlier. And you basically just program the movement of the event or even the player step by step. And you can up, down, left, right. You can make them take one step forward or one step backward, move away from player, toward player, turn 90 degrees, etc. Change frequency of movement, change movement speed, change graphic, the blending, all sorts of different stuff. Most of this is pretty much self-explanatory with the stuff that we've already covered. Jump, it basically makes it look like the character's jumping at like an arc, and you determine that by the XY coordinates. Wait is a specified amount of time that nothing happens with the event, and it won't do anything else until that specified amount of time is up. You can set it to repeat a specific action. So for instance, if you want them to run back and forth, but you don't want to have to put a ton of different left and right commands, make them go back and forth, you can click repeat action and they'll just do it over and over again. Skip if cannot move. This is really handy for play testing your game, and it basically means that if the event can't move, then it skips it altogether, which is really handy if you're wanting to test whether or not a certain pattern of movement looks right, and if something winds up getting in the way, you don't have to worry about it just sticking there and not progressing at all. Next is, where was I? Get on and off vehicle. That's self-explanatory. Character, you can change the transparency of the character on and off, change player followers. In some games that you've played, you've probably seen where the party members follow the main character around. That's essentially what this is. Whether or not you have a string of followers behind you, or who are the other party members, or you can turn it off completely if that's not your style of game. Gather followers means that if you want all the followers and the main character to gather up in one spot, let's say if, for instance, if you want an event to take place where it looks like they're all standing in different spots, well, you can't exactly do that if all of the followers are still behind you, and it'd look kind of tacky to just have them completely disappear. So you'd gather up your followers first, turn off the followers function, and then you'd have other events take their places for the, we'll say, basically the cutscene. Show animation. These are animations that are normally used in battle, but you can display them on the map, which is actually pretty handy for special effects. Balloon icon, it's just different little, like, anime, cartoony word bubbles that pop up over them. Heart, Z's for sleeping, exclamation, that sort of stuff. Erase event. Oops. Erase event completely removes the event until you leave the map and come back. Screen effects, fade out, fade in, tint screen to a different color, make it flash. You can adjust the different colors and the intensity of the flash, how long it takes for the flash to complete, if you want to wait for the flash to complete before the event moves forward. Shake screen. Power is how intense the shaking is, and the speed is how fast the shaking takes place. The rest of it is essentially the same thing as the flash. Timing is like in the set move route, where it waits for a specified amount of time and doesn't do anything until that time is up. Picture and weather, you can actually take JPEGs or, I believe, PNG files and that sort of thing, and you can actually put a picture onto the screen in the game. Like, for instance, if the players are going, or the characters rather, are going through a cave and you want the screen to fade out, and it shows a picture of a cavern and they start talking to one another for a little bit more of a unique game feel, you can use show picture, and it's a little complicated. It'll definitely take a few tries to get it to fit right unless you've done it numerous times before. But picture graphic is literally just whatever picture you want. The origin as to whether or not you want it to originate in the upper left corner of the screen, or if it's centered in the middle of the screen. And that's basically, if I remember correctly, it's based off of the picture center. But like I said, I've not really used this very much myself. It's more of a hassle than I'm willing to put forth for some of the games that I've made. So I usually just leave it out. I've never really had any need to use it. I kind of go with the more old school type of gameplay. The location on the screen, which is the X and Y coordinates, you can base it off of variables, blending, zoom, that sort of thing. You can move the picture, rotate the picture, tint the picture, erase the picture. Set weather effects is interesting. You can literally have an effect on the screen for rain, storm, and snow, and it will look like that in the gameplay. You can affect how powerful the storm is. You can set the amount of frames that it will take place, and if you use this with a parallel process, it will constantly rain, or storm, or snow, just so you know. But keep in mind, for something like that, you will have to use another set weather effects for when you go to another map. If, for instance, you're going inside of a house, you can't exactly have it raining inside of a house, because it will carry from map to map. You would have to use this with the door event to turn off the weather effects, and then you'd have to have it turned back on when you leave the house. Music effects, that's pretty self-explanatory. Yeah, that's really all this is just sound effects and music. Play ME, that's called a music effect, and I'll demonstrate it here. The music effects or for instance the fanfare that plays at the end of the victory, or when you win a battle. If you lose a battle, you've got the game over. You've got an end song, semi sound effects for, like, you know, you're surprised by something, so shock of play. Organ. Victory. You get the picture. Sound effects are just that. You have a long list of different sound effects that you can pick from. Magic sound effects, monsters, opening and closing of doors and chests. Just a whole long list of different sound effects you can use. And before you ask, yes, you can import your own background music, sound effects, and music effects into the game. And you can fade out the background music, replay. Something else that you can do, which is really interesting with music effects, is, I'm not sure if it's in this version or not, but at one point or another, it was a cricket sound effect, and I loved whenever I came across a game that had like crickets playing, cricket sounds playing in the background when the players or the characters rather, have made camp or something like that. But next, final page is scene control. Battle processing is it forces a battle to start. Shop processing, it forces a shop to start. Shop processing is what you'll be using for making your item shops and that sort of thing. You'd basically just put this in, and then you select what items they would sell and what price. Now, the standard is what you set in the editor itself when making the item, and then you can use specify if you want it to be sold for something different at this particular shop. You can also set it to where it's a shop that only purchases things, they don't sell things. Name input processing, you can adjust how many characters you want available to the player, and it lets them name a specified player or character. I keep getting those mixed up. Open menu screen, open save screen, game over, it just displays the game over picture. Return to title screen, system settings. You can basically turn on and off different things in the core system of the game. Like, for instance, if you want background music and battles to be turned off no matter what, you can do that. Music effects at the end, save access, menu access, change encounters, all sorts of different things you can turn on and off with system settings. This is something new. You can actually play video in RPG Maker now. You see, they didn't actually have this in RPG Maker VX. This is something new to Ace, and I think they mainly did that was because, one, it was in popular demand, and second, you technically could play videos in VX, but you had to play the video from the background music folder, and it would open up in a separate screen. And people made various different scripts for playing videos and movies in-game, but a lot of them were buggy or they were very complicated to work. So, that's good to have now. Map, you can change the map name display, whether or not the map name will display in, for instance, I believe it's in the main menu. I could be wrong. You can change the tile set for a map, change the battle background, like the background image of whatever battle scene that you're using. Parallax background. Parallax backgrounds are basically background images that will repeat. So for instance, if you had a parallax background on a map, but you used one of the tiles for one of the walkable areas like grass or something like that, it would literally repeat that same map over and over again. Let's see, get location info, the terrain tag, event ID, region ID, all sorts of different stuff you can do there. I'm not entirely sure what you would use all that for, because I'm not familiar with it. I'm more familiar with VX, not ACE, but have fun with that. This is based in the battle events. You can change the enemy HP and MP, change the enemy state, recover all, etc. And you can force a monster, or I believe you can even have an actor use a specific action instead of, just giving the player complete control in the battle. That's mainly for like in-game cutscenes and that sort of thing. Indexes are basically which monster the player will attack, or the monster will attack, for that matter. And you can select what skill they're going to use and that sort of thing. Abort battle, it forces the battle to end, obviously. And advanced, the only thing under there is script, and this allows a person to literally type in a script piece here to run from the event. And that's pretty much all. Oh, last thing that we're going to go ahead and cover is the event pages. Now you see the little one here. It looks like it's a tab, but you can't really do anything with it. That's because you only have one page right now. So if you were to make a new event, there's tab 2, tab 1, and this is really good if, for instance, you want to change something's graphic to something else. Like, you just discovered who the villain is, and he changes into his monster form or whatever. You can use this as well as a self switch to change the graphic to something else. You can copy the a specific tab in the event editor. You can delete events. You can completely clear out an event, see even the graphics gone, and it just resets it. And I think that's about all we're going to cover for today, because personally my voice is starting to get a little hoarse, and I think I have made a fairly long video as it is. I don't know how long this video is yet until I hit the stop button, but hopefully it's not too long. So hopefully this helps to clear up some of your questions about making events in RPG Maker VX Ace, and I'm surely going to be making other events, event-based videos in the future, like showing you how to properly use switches and variables and self switches and all that crazy stuff. So be sure to watch some of my videos in the future if you're looking forward to learning about all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to bid you a good day. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you soon.